Hello, and welcome everyone to another episode of Riz Talks. I'm your host, Riz, and I'm glad you can join me as we embark on our journey together to explore some of the interesting subjects that impact us, leading us to learn about who we are, where we headed, and what it truly means to be human. Our motto is to think again about our views based on facts and true history. There are more sides, there are more sides to every story. Do the things we hold to be true even matter in the grand scheme of humanity? Today, we're pulling back the curtain on the single most influential piece of paper in the world, the US dollar, and asking if dollar's demise is coming. If so, what happens next? Let's delve into today's topic, dollar's dance with destiny. Once upon a time, the US dollar was as good as gold, literally, but today it's backed by faith. For most of modern history, global trade was anchored to something shiny and tangible, gold. The gold standard linked currency value directly to gold. This system provided stability, but had its drawbacks. The United States, fully embraced it in 1879, ensuring that every dollar was backed by a specific amount of gold. The Great Depression then hit, and the US faced severe deflation. To combat this, in 1933, President Franklin Roosevelt suspended the gold standard for domestic transactions. Domestic only, aiming to expand the money supply and stimulate the economy. Fast forward post World War II, the Bretton Woods system pegged international currencies to the United States dollar, which was convertible to gold. However, by the late 1960s, the US couldn't maintain this convertibility due to a surplus of dollars abroad and dwindling gold reserves. So in 1971, President Nixon severed the dollar's final link to the gold standard, creating a system of fiat money. What does it mean, fiat money? As explained by an American economist, money is backed by the full faith and credit of the US government, which is a fancy way of saying it's valuable because we all agree it is. It is a collective belief system printed on cotton linen paper. Why a dollar buys much less today than 100 years ago, due to controlled inflation for nearly a century, is another episode of Riz Talks. But today, let's talk about the destiny of dollar. Recently, the US dollar made up about 58% of all known central bank foreign exchange reserves because they needed to trade in US dollars for international trade. That's down from over 70% at the turn of the millennium. Meanwhile, the expanded BRICS countries, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, and others, which represents over 3.5 billion people, almost half of the world's population, it is projected to contribute over 50% of global GDP by 2035. Balance is not just shifting, it's pivoting. The reign of the greenback started in 1944, as mentioned at the Bretton Woods conference. The US dollar was crowned king, backed by gold. This gave America what a French finance minister at the time famously called the exorbitant privilege. It meant the US could run massive deficits, fund wars, and stimulate its economy by printing more of the very currency the world needed for oil, trade, and stability. It's like being the sole printer of monopoly money in a game where everyone is forced to play. For decades, this was the bedrock of global finance. Then came the rebellion. The need for a system change created BRICS Plus, now including economic heavyweights like Saudi Arabia and the UAE, Indonesia, and others. It isn't just an economic story, it's a geopolitical one. The US used the dollar's power as a surgical tool of foreign policy through sanctions, which has killed more people than wars since sanctions started. In a multipolar currency system, no single country could unilaterally cut another off from the global financial bloodstream. This could redefine national sovereignty, allowing countries to pursue independent foreign policies without the existential threat of being debanked from the world economy. It's the difference between having one superpower as a landlord who can change the locks at will, and a co op board where you need a consensus. Using the IMF and World Bank for economic blackmail might end for the third world if this happens. In recent years, gold has been shining brightly again. Central banks, especially in emerging markets, are bolstering their gold reserves, driven by geopolitical tensions and a desire to diversify away from the US dollar. Despite gold's allure, returning to a gold backed system presents challenges. The global economy scale now has vastly increased, and a gold standard could limit monetary policy flexibility, making it difficult to respond to economic crises. The flip side, what no one talks about, the stuff that doesn't make the headlines. The petrodollar system, since the 70s, oil being priced in dollars created a constant global demand for greenbacks, the US dollar. If BRICS plus countries starts trading oil in yuan, rupees, or a new currency, that foundational demand for dollars could shrink, potentially affecting everything from your gas price to the interest rate on your car loan. Any country that dared to trade in other currencies like Iran, Venezuela, Libya was sanctioned, bombed, or a regime change initiated to keep the mighty dollar afloat. Then there's a psychological concept called the endowment effect. We value things more highly simply because we own them. The West is endowed with the current system. We are used to its benefits. The thought of losing it, even to a potentially fairer system, feels like a profound loss. This isn't just a financial shift, it's a psychological one, challenging our sense of place in the global order. So let's summarize. The dollar's journey from gold to greenbacks is at a historic crossroads. A coalition representing half the world is building an alternative, not just for economic gain, but for strategic autonomy and to end the era of unilateral financial warfare. The potential benefits of the global south are immense: greater sovereignty, reduced coercion, and a louder voice. But the transition risks are equally real: global volatility, a potential loss of economic stability in the West, and a dangerous period of geopolitical friction. Here are the pros and cons. In a successful multipolar system, humanity will benefit by end of unilateral sanctions, protecting smaller nations from economic coercion and fostering a more balanced and sovereign global political landscape. Reduce single point risk. The global economy will be less vulnerable to a crisis originating in one country, as has been seen in the past with the crisis in America. Empowerment and development for the global south. Easier access to capital and trade on their own terms could accelerate poverty reduction and sustainable development. Checks and balances. A more balanced global order could encourage diplomacy over coercion. There will be a downside if this happens, and the cons are transition turbulence. The period of shifting from one system to another could be marked by extreme currency volatility, crashing markets, and a potential global recession that would hurt the most vulnerable first. Currency wars and trade blocs. Nations might engage in competitive devaluations, and the world could fracture into competing economic blocs, hindering global cooperation on transnational issues like climate change and pandemic response. And then the who's in charge problem. In a crisis, a multipolar system may lack the clear leadership to orchestrate a coordinated global response, potentially leading to slower and less effective solutions. The petrodollar unwind. A move away from dollar priced commodities could lead to a devaluation of the dollar, increasing the cost of imports and fueling inflation in the United States and allied nations, directly impacting the wallets of ordinary citizens and the billionaires. We can see that the reliance on petrol is reducing. The real question isn't just about economics, it's about what kind of global system we want: one of unilateral pressure or one of negotiated multipolar balance. While a full return to the gold standard seems unlikely, gold's role as a hedge against uncertainty remains vital. As the global economic landscape evolves, gold will continue to be a significant player, even if it doesn't reclaim its throne as the world's reserve currency. Closing thoughts: whether it's paper or precious metal, the value of money hinges on trust. And trust, much like gold, is a treasure worth safeguarding. So here is your challenge. If the power to shape the global economy is shifting from a committee of one to a committee of many, are we as global citizenry mature enough to handle the complexity and compromise that true multipolarity demands. Thank you for joining this deep dive on risk talks. Are we living in a world and in a way that will leave this world better? It's now time to act. So please share the message with others. Think again, challenge ideas, join the conversation, and subscribe. This is Risk Talks. Be curious, be kind, and come back for more.